We're live. Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Thank you so much for joining us at Remote Fest. We're super excited and delighted to have you over here. Thank you so much, amazing speakers, Muneeb Saleem, Muneeb Sultan, and Samia for joining us on Sunday. It's really an honor to have you guys over here. So before I actually start talking about the topic and we touch the topic, I would love to quickly introduce myself and introduce all the amazing panelists that we have. So my name is Hamza Tahir. I'm the head of developer relations at RemoteBase. Together with me, I have Muneeb Salim, who's the senior software engineer at Google. We have Muneeb Sultan, who's the ML senior manager at insitro, and then we have Samia Khalid, senior applied scientist at Microsoft. Thank you guys again for honoring us with your presence. Yep. So now, just getting back to the topic, I feel like it's a really interesting topic. Like I heard, it's not just in the movies or something. That that you think about something like robotics or data and privacy and everything. But our panel discussion is around this really interesting topic, which is AI, human ethics, and open source software. Having your diverse backgrounds and your expertise in AI, machine learning, all the panelists would love to hear from you on this topic. As we'll proceed with the session, but before we actually go to our specific questions, I'll quickly give a context of this topic, which is these technologists have data sets, right? The algorithms and the computer power, compute power required to invent something that could be very well, the last creation mankind has to ever create. Artificial intelligence, if you talk about, has the capability of solving a lot of the challenges, like almost all the challenges that we face. Either it's the climate change, it's ending the world poverty by Bitcoin or something, like the algorithms running behind. Not talking about the Elon Musk tweets, but yeah, curing cancer and educating the world phenomenally as well, right? But there's no hiding fact that we have an ethical responsibility when creating something more powerful than ourselves, right? Especially with the data these days. The world is actually driven by data, and we're sharing our data unintentionally, intentionally, to all the big organizations or small businesses out there. And we've already faced ethical dilemmas when it comes to the technology, but they will pale in comparison to issues what we'll be facing in the coming years. And until now, AI had been deterministic, meaning that we could actually just search for something. The algorithms were super simple, if and then statements. You could search for particular things, and the algorithm shows that to us right on the internet. But there has been some challenges with these AI and algorithms getting more smarter than the humans itself, because they were trained to be like this. But at the same time, just addressing some of these concerns, I'll just quickly move forward to my first question that I'll ask from each of the panelists, which is your great experience working with AI and ML tools or algorithms, some of your favorite ones as well, or currently that you're working with at your organization, and why AI or ML is so inspiring for you all. So maybe starting with Samya.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thanks for the intro and thanks for having us here for this great discussion. So I work currently at Microsoft in the Office 365 suite. So we have tons of enterprise data. So my team in particular works on natural language understanding, trying to create graphs and understanding all the richness that's there and to power experiences like Viva topics and extracting definitions and the richer data that's there to help users understand what's going on, to grasp the documents. So a lot on the natural language understanding part. And then I worked also with internal like feed recommendations. So that's been a very interesting one, since we are bombarded with feeds, whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatnot. So yeah, I have had exposure to that side as well, which is very interesting. And yeah, other like things like also predictive maintenance. We're trying to use AI to understand the maintenance schedule of trucks and when they would say and so on. But in general, I would say like what I find the most inspiring is just the field in itself is so fascinating because you think you have all this data and now all of a sudden like you can do so many things, whether it is for disease and drugs discovery to imagine like when I was a kid, at least I still remember having that dictionary to translate from one language to another. You would go like one word and then find the next word and the next and then compose the sentence out of it in the other language. And now instantaneously you can like translate to like whichever language around the world you want. And then also image recognition and so many amazing applications. So that's like, and it can solve real problems. So that's what I find very inspiring. Now, of course, like anything else, it's a double-edged sword. There are issues. It's the same like with knife. You can use the knife to do so many your household chores, cut foods, cook and whatnot, and you can use the same thing to kill someone as well, right? So it's basically that. So yeah, in general, it's super interesting. Yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, Muneeb, Saleem, would you like to add something on?
Sure. So quickly, before Google, I've been working on some computer vision, neural network-based architecture within machine learning or deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning. And at Google, as you know, like there are many teams working on research as well as product side who work on different things from large language models, new computer vision architectures, as well as speech translation. And currently, I'm in the Area 120 division, which is an internal incubator within Google. So we are more focused on building new products with existing AI technologies. So not a research team, but uh, yeah, more about building some impactful products using existing AI tech.
Absolutely. Muneeb Sultan.
Thanks, Sansa, and thank you again for organizing this. Really appreciate it. So, by way of, so currently I'm like you said, like an ML senior manager in Citro, and in Citro, what you're trying to do is build out a machine learning enabled drug discovery company, where the idea is we modern biology is capable of generating vast amounts of data, and what we're trying to do is build predictive insights into it by combining various computational and algorithmic techniques layered on top of these data sets. And so, for example, in the past couple of years, I've worked on using convolution networks to get insights into our microscopy imaging data sets, using graph neural networks to get insights into molecular discovery, and then in general, building out recommender systems so that you can cut through vast swaths of chemical space. And the idea is that what we want to do is be able to design drugs that are efficacious, that are safe, that have all the right molecular properties that we care about, and do it faster than it would be having to build it one atom at a time in some ways in the lab. Um, I think the same question you asked was what I was most excited by, and I think I'll echo Samia here, which is that I think there's every time a new technology comes in, it allows you to start thinking of things at a higher level in some ways. Um, and that's been true for any piece of technology for the last 100 years, from cars to transportation to ecosystems. And I think as machine learning systems evolve, we will start to actually see new industries pop up that are actually built on top of these. And I think that will be the most interesting part, is that we are sort of building out the groundwork for a next generation of industries. And I think that will be really interesting to see. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing. Your experiences and some of your inspirations at the same time. But just coming back to the topic again, since organizations like Google, Microsoft, and all like Meta or all of these tech giants, they're contributing a lot to the open source ecosystem, right? And even in terms of the algorithms, or even in terms of and just like any other technology or framework, there's so much that's out there, right, for the developers to actually to utilize, and rather than not to reinvent the wheel, right? So I just want to ask, how do you guys actually see open source as that can actually solve one of open source in terms of AI, and human ethics can actually solve one of the challenges, as Samia was telling all earlier about that. It's a double-edged sword, just like a knife, right? a knife which you can either either cook or maybe kill someone. Because there's been recently a lot of cases in which AI uh, has been blamed for not being really accurate, or to actually people getting to the jail as well, right, because of some algorithms in Wisconsin, right? But how do you see the role of open source in terms of just for the developers to actually have this transparency, and I mean if having the logic chain to be more accessible to understand the algorithms, or maybe if you want to talk about the adoption of tech through open source. Yeah, so Samya, maybe if you want to go
Yeah.
next.
Sure. Yeah, I can start. So, ethics in general, this is like a very difficult topic, something new that in the tech ecosystem we are encountering. So, there's a lot of still to be done on what, even globally, if we need to reach consensus of what is ethical and what is not. For example, right, that's a hard place to be. So, we need those global regulation, and who is that will decide, right? Even, for example, I give you the example of computer vision, like for face detection. For example, in the US, they're saying, okay, let's not do that. It's not ethical, as the issues somebody pointed out, right? But for example, China is doubling down on that, right? They are working on creating the technology. They are advancing in that sense. But even besides that, just when we call what is ethical or not, it's still something, lots of work needs to be done. All the companies, like all the big companies, also are leading the conversation, whether it's Microsoft, Google, with the responsible AI and the principles. And we have lots of things like regulations coming up. There was a summit where people agreed what are some of the laws. But still lots to be done in this area. And we'll see more people besides engineers and AI, people, a lot of coming from, whether it's psychology, philosophy, people from those domains coming in and taking lead and contributing. But just when it comes to open source, and you mentioned transparency, I'll give you the example of the hot topic, like Elon Musk taking Twitter, right? And then he mentioned, oh, you know what, we should open source the algorithm. So I'll take that as an example. Let's say it's done, right? Twitter, the ranking algorithm is open source. It's out there. The positive side is that it allows like so many eyes, many researchers can go and contribute and help it improve, right? But on the other hand, it's also giving access to the attackers, the potential manipulators. They can now go and see, oh, how they can tweak and how they can attack, right? So that's to be seen as well. So while, yeah, you do get contributions, you have that negative as well. And besides that, Twitter, for example, has taken years to develop their algorithm. So for each of the companies, they're not doing charity, right? So they have the competitive edge that if Twitter open sources, now someone else can go and take it. So they have taken years to develop. So how do all these companies, if they open source too much, maintain that competitive advantage, right? They have their tools, say Google for TensorFlow or Facebook for PyTorch, or similarly Microsoft, like if they put out there everything open source, then they need to maintain that competitive edge. So there's still like open sourcing that to AI will not solve all the problems, so new problems, but again, it's something we haven't tackled before, so it will be needs to be experimenting, and yeah, we'll see how it goes there. But one thing I'll add is transparency. While AI with movies and everything, it's a bit exaggerated, so we are still not there, still a lot to be done. It's not smarter than humans. And even the smaller companies where people are creating applications, I'm talking about product side, not research. And it's good all three of us are from the product side. So you still, right now, many of the problems can be solved with regression or tree-based models where you have explainable. But people, especially getting started this, and even smaller companies, they don't have the data. They think, oh, I need to do the deep learning model, right? Maybe there's still a lot of room that we have to take. Yeah.
Yeah,
I could go on,
absolutely.
but I'll let other folks.
Yeah, I'm sure this topic is I totally agree in terms of the regulations, and you mentioned about Elon Musk, and he being also he's being advocating for government regulations, like for AI as well, right? Like, and of course there's some pros and cons in terms of making most of the algorithms open source. and of course adoption can actually be like increase for sure. That's another point. But I kind of like have another opinion on that as well, in terms of like maybe even if you open it up for everybody to actually adopt, or but having some kind of APIs, right? Even if not the whole logic chain to be disclosed, but maybe like some APIs to for even for the developers, or for more tech people to actually like understand some of the if not the complete logic, but at least like the processes that were done to actually reach to a particular conclusion. But would love to know more from Muneeb Saleem, and then we'll Muneeb Sultan, we would love to hear from you then.
Sure, I'll try to be very quick. So as you know, like AI is, at least data-driven models are using a lot of data, right? That's how they get all their power. And it's also said that AI is software 2.0, that instead of writing code by logic, now we are writing code using data. So data is your logic, really. So when you say open sourcing, I think what it really means is if you, that you really want to open source that data, right? Or it's understandable that companies would not want to open source all their data because that's kind of their secret sauce now. Instead of the code, now it's their data sets. So then my personal opinion is, it's just my personal opinion, that there should be a way to certify any of these like major APIs. For example, there's a face detection API, right? There should be a third party auditing on these APIs which verifies that they are not biased towards any race or any ethnicity or one of these things. And you're like, maybe something like you have to get a license for launching a public API, or which when you go beyond a certain number of users, you have to get it certified that yeah, this is not biased API. But internally, I think to nip the problem in its like origin, you have to make sure that your data sets that you're using to train, they are unbiased, right? So there are a lot of different tools available which are open source, which you can use to check that your data is not biased towards one side or the other, and make sure that some of the features are not used. For example, where this person lives, what's their name, what's their uh, like race. These things should not be used for developing any of these models. Like, for example, when somebody applies for a loan, it's very common here that you have to give a reason if you don't approve their loan. And that means the model has to be explainable. So a lot of these like very large, complicated models, they are not that explainable. And I don't think it's very productive to be going in that direction of making them explainable, because that's not really their core property. So instead of you can maybe validate them in some other way, like treat the model as a black box model and try to certify that yes, it's not a biased model.
Yeah, I totally agree. Muneeb Sultan.
Yeah, I think um, ethics, I think, is going to be an ongoing hot topic for decades to come for most of these systems. And I think something that gets maybe lost here a little bit in translation is that there's, for most of these large companies, there's no single model or algorithm that's like doing rankings, or there's like layers and layers of these models that are actually interacting with one another. And I think these ethical systems need to start taking almost a systems level approach, which is um, you can audit single models or single data sets, but are they all interacting with each other in a fair way? And I think that's something that gets really hard to translate to a common audience, or somebody that's not deeply in, is how do these models or interact with one another, and how do they represent information to the end user in some ways. And I think while this is a problem, I think this will likely be a industry in the future, which is systematically how do you validate systems. And I think the solution here is that the companies need to be willing to provide endpoints that allow you to actually validate their models more than anything else, because I'm not so sure how much we can. I agree, I think we need basic checks on data, but there's a lot of edge cases that become very, very hard to tackle, and the tail end of this distribution is very, very long in some ways. And I think the best we can do is to try and open source that problem more than the other way around. But yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, and thank you so much for like for explaining it to that extent. Since we have diverse kind of audience in terms of like students and some early stage engineers as well joining this session. So maybe one question regarding that, like since you guys are expert in those domains of like using if not 100, but you might have used thousands of algorithms, or like just studied a lot of them, right? So some of for those engineers, there's like there's a question that somebody asked me, like what are some of the best practices you have to access to assess a problem and write the and actually write the right algorithm or find the right framework to solve those challenges. How do you actually usually do it within your roles, like at your daily life? So it's not compulsory that Samia has to go, like but yeah, anybody wants to go on this topic, sharing any of the algorithms or problem or the right approach to actually like just handle it.
Or I can start. No worries. Um, I, so I think going from academia to industry, I sort of switched my mindset of thinking. I worry a lot less about the algorithms and I worry a lot more about the data. And I spend a lot of time thinking about whether we have collected the right data set, whether we have split it the right ways, whether we have done a lot of checks that are, because I think if there is a bias that can be learned within these data sets, these models will pick up on it, and they'll pick up on it way faster than any other thing. And so you have to really know the domain in some ways and think about and talk to the counterparts that you have who are collecting the data in some ways to understand the domain a little bit. I think that's where um, I I guess personally my opinion is like where we should be thinking quite a bit about as well.
Yeah. So anybody else wants to add anything on that? Otherwise, like we're just yep, Muneeb.
Yeah, I would just say let's start with the simplest algorithm or model that you can find. Just try to play with that because that will just make your life easier. Instead of starting with a huge transformer language model, just start with a very simple thing that you can find that will let you learn about the data that you have as well and learn about your own problem, which is the most important thing.
And I'll just totally agree with what's been said, and that when especially you are in the product development side, the algorithm in itself model, as Muneeb also mentioned, that that's a very small part. There's a lot more, and that's where there's the misconception with students that I'll get into an ML AI role and all I'll be doing is training that model. But there's the data handling and a lot more that takes like 80% of your time, and then there's a smaller part that's about the actual model. So it's a lot more than what you see. And then, of course, in academia, it's like things are handled slightly differently because there you're trying to push the state of the art and it's a different mindset and the goals are different.
Yeah, I totally agree, and like thank you so much for explaining it. For the understanding of this or of the engineers, or like but yeah, thank you so much, guys, for your time. And actually, like we're a bit we exceeded the time limit, but this topic was like super engaging, and thank you so much for your thoughts and for your time and for joining us for this session. We're delighted to have had you guys over here.
Thank you, Hamza.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Have a good day ahead. Take care. Bye bye.